So, this video comes in the midst of having driven around to try to find internet, and then having to, ending up in front of a Jazzy Bagel in downtown Gresham, where Wi-Fi could finally be found and connected to. Yeah. But it's fine. Anyway, the message is supposed to be the beginning of a series, specifically on a topic that we covered before. There's a whole series on spiritual offices, and essentially what this is supposed to be is a new sort of series on, well, team building in essence, through the vessel of looking at spiritual offices. And for tonight, just like the week prior, the message was supposed to be effectively about just kind of a reminder of what an office is and what it looks like and the value of it, and the value in terms of fivefold ministry, which is a lot of Christianese for saying effectively, kind of the roles that different people have innately, and how those are meant to work together in order to really build a church. That's Heather playing with a flashlight.
Heather's not here.
Heather's here. She's here.
Definitely not. Stop, you promised.
I didn't do anything.
Yes, you promised.
All they get is like this obscure thing on the ceiling.
I definitely want that on there.
Alright, anyway. It's
Continue.
Yeah, they just get like shadows moving around on the ceiling, and that's the full range of Heather. Anyways, the spiritual offices. Alright, so basically we derive the concept of spiritual offices out of Ephesians 4, which I will read, specifically the part where Paul brings them up. Open up to Ephesians. There we go. If my curly fingers can work the pages. There we go. So, there we go. So we'll just read the first few verses to kind of like give the full spectrum of what Paul's talking about. I, therefore, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. But grace was given to each one of us according to the measure of Christ's gift. Therefore it says, when he ascended on high, he led a host of captives, and he gave gifts to men. In saying he ascended, what does it mean but that he also descended into the lower parts of the earth? He who descended is the one who also ascended far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things. Just a clarifying thing. And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, or shepherds, as some interpret it, that word, and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature to the full measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, so that we may no longer be children tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way unto him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. It's Ephesians 4, 1 through 16. 1 through 16. Oh no, the Bible, it's falling apart. Anyway, here you go.
You broke it.
I broke it. I broke the Bible. I did it.
My Bible.
I'm gonna burn in hell faster than Grant.
Oh my gosh. He's serious, Grant. Serious. Don't worry, I'll help you kick his ass.
It's fine. It's fine. By all means, make these promises.
By all means,
Make
kick
them.
my ass.
Okay. So, talking about the offices, and specifically what Paul's talking about with Ephesians 4, it's actually pretty simplistic in the nature of it being, you know, God created these different roles in the church. And in creating them, it was intended to be something that builds up the body, the church body, to the fullest form of functioning. And that's specific to individuals as well. See, each of us has a lot to develop in. Now, we extrapolate a lot from this, and there's a lot of stuff that God has shared with people and so on that's kind of derived from this. There's nowhere in the Bible where it specifically talks about where it specifically phrases them as spiritual offices or something like that. That's stuff that we came up with to kind of explain this aspect of being a follower of Jesus, as being a person in general. And you know, when we talked about the offices, we discussed the fact that they're not really they're not something that come through the Holy Spirit. Essentially, they come because they're aspects of God that exist in every one of us. And each one comes with a certain kind of focus, which might seem a little arcane in a way.
Nobody's here.
But effectively, it boils down to this. The office of the apostle, these people are to explain the whole thing a little bit more concisely, offices represent different aspects of God's character, his person, as it were. And every person has God's breath in them. That's part of our very creation from the beginning. As a result of that, there are little traces of him in our DNA. And in that you'll find that a lot of people, they have this sort of what we often refer to as a heart cry. But that's a way of saying kind of an innate motivation. It's not something that they really control. It's something that they do, though. And when we talk about the 5 different offices, you find that they have 5 very different motivating factors. And, you know, during this series on offices, we talked about kind of the different roles and how they work in the body and different things like that. And we go into a lot of details about that. And that's not really what we're here to do in this particular series. This series is intended to expound more on just the interactions between different roles and the way that they work. Like, if you want a crash course in spiritual offices, the whole series is on YouTube. And by all means, go spend the time watching it, listening to it. It's an okay series, I guess.
It's a good series. I love it.
Yeah. So, with that, but the video about interactions was a little short. So apparently we're going over that more in a lot of ways, and how they kind of function with each other, with one another, and how to kind of get over the hurdles that we run into, because when you have 5 different parts...
Hurdles, for sure.
Yes, indeed. That would be the sound of rain beating against the top of the car. I don't know how well it's going to be picked up on the microphone. Frankly, I don't really know how much of anything is going to be picked up on the microphone. It's going to be a fun experience finding out.
But we're getting over those hurdles.
We are getting over those hurdles.
Yeah.
Dagnabbit.
Yeah, that's it.
Anyway. So. So to be specific about the heart cries and the different motivations, like I was saying, you know, and when you've got like 5 different kind of innate motivating factors buried deep within people's souls, they're gonna see things from a different light from each other. And I know that, like, you could argue that there are more and stuff like that, but we'll just express like what those 5 are. So when we talk about the offices, there are 5. The apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, or shepherds, however you want to phrase it. We tend to use shepherd because pastor has a...
Stigma?
Yeah, exactly, a stigma. And that stigma is pretty problematic in a lot of ways. Whenever I say pastor, like, people think... The first thing that comes to mind is the guy who runs the church and sits in front of the church. They do all the messages and do all the prayers, and they're kind of like the top authority. Whereas in this particular context, and most times in the Bible when pastor is brought up, they're talking about a shepherd. Somebody who sees to the needs of the sheep, takes care of them, tends them. Not the ultimate authority, not the head of the building, or the head of the church, or anything like that. So, you know, it's a thing. But to avoid the stigma, we tend to use the word shepherd. So if you hear shepherd, you'll usually hear pastor. Usually it's just a back and forth type of thing. And then there are also teachers. So, drawing from that old series, and especially the thing here, the heart cry, the focus, the motivating factor of each one is that apostles are motivated primarily by community and by the development of community. They're going to carry it on their backs if they have to. But see, the point is with any of it, and see, there are a lot of different reasons for why they do it. There are a lot of different ways that they go about doing it. Just kind of as an example to start off with before I share the other ones, you know, the apostle will move in their way trying to develop and maintain community. It's why you'll find a lot of them who are like, they have their group of friends and they're fighting for all those friends. Or they're going above and beyond, or doing all these different things. And you can find people who are apostles who are also like hiding from community because they've been so hurt by it. And they just hate people with a passion. But at the same time, you know, the moment they find a group of friends again, they fall right back into that same method, that same rhythm of just pouring everything they can out on those people, trying to pull them into their community and develop them. Oftentimes they'll be like leaders in their community, whether they want to be or not, they'll end up there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an innate thing, they can't help it. They care about the community, and as a result, the community responds by caring about them. So when we talk about like heart cries, the heart cry of the apostle is the community. It is for the community. And the way that that kind of shows a picture of God is God's caring about the community. God lives in community all the time, every day, every moment. God is in constant community between himself, you know, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are a functional community at all times, the Trinity. And what's more is those who have the Spirit in them are a part of God, just as much as he's a part of them. It's when it's something that you can extrapolate. It's not even extrapolated. It's literally just said by Jesus in John 17 when he talks about the kind of like involvement between those who have the Spirit and those who, and so on, how he is in the Father and the Father is in him, and those who he is in are in there. It's very, very involved. So God's desire for the community, his love for the community, is something that runs so deep. And apostles in a lot of ways are a reflection of that aspect of God. And they can't help themselves. It's just who they are. It's how they are. They didn't learn it. They just developed, and this is the way they are. Then when you talk about the other offices, prophets are the ones where their heart cry is for depth, for intimacy, specifically. No one, like, they just crave it. Every prophet that I know craves intimacy, period. Whether it's, you know, if they know God, it's with God. If they're not with God, it's with, you know, individuals. Oftentimes in relationships with, you know, a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever, it doesn't matter. They crave intimacy so much that they'll engage themselves with some individual and just develop it that way. But that's the aspect of God that they kind of represent, they reflect, is that desire for deep connection, deep, intimate knowledge and relationship. Prophets yearn for that. Teachers are about structure, organization. That's their motivating factor. That's their thing, their heart cry. They're the ones who want to organize and put together things. They want to build structure for other people, and they don't always look like booky, nerdish types. Like, you can find a coach for a little league game, and, you know, he's just as much a teacher as, you know, that somebody standing in front of a classroom. Because what he does is what they do is they help organize things and bring them together. They help teach us, but their methodology for teaching comes from that cry to just bring everything into a kind of a structure that we can make sense of. So they want to take people under their wing and lift them up and help them see, help them understand, help them function. That's their motivating factor, is structure.
And learning, right?
Oh yeah, learning's a big deal. But
they have like a hunger to like constantly be learning something else, something new.
Oh yeah. But that's not even the learning comes because it helps them organize and structure.
Oh. Interesting.
With shepherds or pastors, whatever you want to phrase them with, It's about care, tending to the needs of others or the needs of the circumstance. You'll find a lot of different kinds of shepherds or pastors, whatever you want to phrase them as, but their primary focus is always on taking care of things, taking care of people, taking care of the church, taking care of animals, taking care of whatever. That's where they focus. And taking care of is a broad term. That's why I say you can find a lot of different types. Some of them are focused on protection. Others are focused on feeding. You know, you'll find shepherds who they just want to take you in and feed you, take care of you. You'll find shepherds who just want to like tend to your wounds, your emotional or physical wounds.
Until you piss them off.
We won't go there yet. And that was a rough message when we did that one. Some of us had some.
Well, they can go find it.
Yeah. Anyway, some of us were projecting a little bit. Yeah.
Stop then.
Anyway, but that's their primary focus. Their heart cry is all about tending to the needs of others. So maybe it's defending them against dangerous people, protecting them, guarding them. Maybe it's feeding them. Maybe it's taking care of them in some other way. But they always, always, always are taking care of somebody or trying to. And evangelists. Oh, the primary heart cry of the evangelist is bringing things together. I think like my phrasing in the series was to say that apostles were builders, but evangelists were the people that brought people into the home, that bring people home. Their heart cry is to save. They want to save the world. They want to save everybody. They're going out all the time, reaching out and drawing people. And they'll take them along with for all these adventures and rides to try to save them. They can't help it. It's just this innate thing. And there's a lot of personality there. There's a lot of stuff. And it can look a lot of different ways. And, you know, when we talk about the five offices, you know, not everybody looks the same. Like, they have that heart cry that's familiar. But they can be very, very different people in terms of how they act, how they function. An evangelist can be an extrovert or an introvert. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They can be loud, boisterous, pushy. They can also be very quiet, soft-spoken, gentle. The truth is that these offices, it's not like, you know, a lot of these personality things, like a Myers and Briggs test or something like that, where, you know, it's supposed to tell you kind of your personality, or the Big Five or anything like that. This is just something, it's a motivating factor in your person, but it's also just a part of who you are. We have to be very careful with broad stroke generalizations when we talk about this, because apostles can be very different from each other. Prophets can be very different from each other. And like, I mean, there are certain proclivities. Like, I don't know a lot of extroverted prophets, and I don't know a lot of introverted evangelists, but I do know them. But there's still a tendency for them to be a little bit more common one way or the other. But see, the thing that's important here is, see, from a certain standpoint, we can see the value if we look at the idea of a fivefold ministry, a church built on these 5 principles, what happens when you have a church where the leadership team is comprised of people who, you have one person who's focused on the community. You have another person who's focused on the intimacy, the depth of relationship that that community has. You have another person who's focused on tending to the needs of that community, the physical, emotional, spiritual needs. Then you have another person focused on the structure and organization of that community. And then you have still another person focused on building, increasing that community, just saving the day in general. That's a powerful team. I mean, like, if you look at that in terms of just the overlap, and we're looking at the motivating factors, the heart cries, and the way that all 5 of those things work very hard to really build the church, to really increase it, not in every way possible. Why widening it, deepening it, and filling the hole in between. That's what happens when you have a 5-fold ministry. That's what happens when all these like obscure moving parts can learn to function together. But you don't really find that in a lot of churches. And something that we talked about in the past series, where a lot of churches are comprised of one of these offices. You've got churches out there where it's a teacher's church, so everybody's really focused on reading the Bible. An example that I can think of, it's not a very good one, but it is an example, is like the Calvary Chapel.
Cavalry, yeah.
It's this like
Temple.
They're focused on reading the Bible verse by verse and that whole thing, and they really want to like understand it in all of its depth. You could say that Bridgetown is a teacher church. John Mark is very much a teacher. A lot of churches are evangelist churches. Rise, for example, in Gresham is an evangelist church. I don't know where Eastil's at anymore. I know under Pastor Jason, they were very much an evangelist church, but I don't know where they're at these days. Shepherd churches, where it's like the leader of the church is a shepherd and he looks for other people like himself. They tend to vary. They also tend to be rather small because they don't really have a lot of lateral movement, or lateral, what's the other one? Vertical. Horizontal movement, we'll say that.
I love it when I'm smarter than you.
They don't grow, is what I'm trying to say. They're usually small and they don't grow very fast. But yeah, I mean, like, you see different kinds of churches. Prophet churches are usually kind of closed off and small.
They're like secret meetings.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, I struggle to find a good example of an apostle church. The grim reality is that a lot of apostles, they don't actually get very far. They tend to get burnt out by church and by leading, and they tend to give up because they just get tired of the constant stream of BS, and then they leave and they go out on their own, and either they build a new church and do it all again, or they just quit, period.
But there's still an apostle either way.
There's still an apostle either way. It's just what happens. So, with that, yeah, it was just kind of to refresh everybody of what these are and what they look like and why they're important. And, you know, last time we had, you know, we finished the whole series by praying for each other and our offices. And, you know, we had, like, Shane was an evangelist, and Heather and Erica and Stephanie and Dusty were prophets, and did we have any other evangelists? I don't think we did. I think Shane was literally the only one
Yeah.
who was there for the
That
prayer.
we know of, yeah.
Yeah, Aaron and Jeremy were both shepherds. I think me and Sean were apostles.
And Grant.
Grant wasn't there.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, there was somebody else. Oh, Kevin. Kevin, I don't actually remember what Kevin was, though.
I think that he's a teacher. I don't know, though.
Yeah, Heather thinks he's a teacher, but I don't remember. He was part of Dusty's group. Either way,
That's why he has a lot of questions.
that's why he has a lot of questions. That would make sense. Anyway, the point is just like, you know, and I know that we have some people who listen to these and weren't there and so on. Oh yeah, and Josh, of course, Josh was there too. He was a
Yeah.
prophet too.
Fellow INFP.
But, you know, he knows that, knew that beforehand. Anyway. So yeah, this is kind of the gist of what tonight was supposed to be about. Just talking about, you know, the intention was to really talk about this and hammer it out a little bit before we kind of start talking about different aspects of it. Every week it'll be 2 different offices and kind of an issue. And that's the other thing too, is like we talk about the different heart cries, and even though you can see like how all 5 of these working together would be very powerful, you can also see how all 5 of these working together would create a great deal of conflict. You know, if the evangelists are always out there trying to save the day, while the shepherds are there at, you know, trying to take care of the needs of others, they're not always going to value the increased flow of people or whatever. Just like if the teachers are focused on the structure of things, they're maybe not always going to see the value of creating more intimacy. And that ends up leading to a lot of the problems for why we have the churches that we have today and why they look the way they do. But the reality is that we all need each other. And you know, when Paul talks about this in Ephesians 4, he talks explicitly about how the intention of these 5 is to really build up the body and to bring everybody into the fullness of maturity. And I say that, I remind us of that part because even though they're kind of these different heart cries, we can all learn and draw from each other and even see and understand the different perceptions, the different perspectives that are being brought forward. It's important for an evangelist, for example, to learn to care about the depth of the intimate relationships and also the just the taking care of the needs of people and being aware of those needs. It's important for them to be able to learn structure and different things like that, and also to value the community and how to build it, how to really build it. Not just let's get a gang of people and stick them in a church. They're saved now. But okay, we got that gang of people in the church. Let's help them see who they are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, an evangelist has so much room to develop, and every single one of them do. That's not to single one out and say that one needs to be fixed. We all need each other to really grow in these things. And we have a lot of capacity to help each other and develop if we're up for it. So, and that's the point of this coming series, is just that, to really develop this, to really look at this. And, you know, like I said, what God gave me when I talked to him about this whole thing was that it was going to be 2 offices a week. talking about different issues, and I have no idea what exactly that's going to look like. I just know that that's what I was told. So yeah, we're going for this ride. And next time I'll probably just like put the video on Heather the whole time.
Your iPad's gonna be broken.
Yes. Anyway, so yeah, I hope that we can figure out something to do video chats as a group, as opposed to just having to do it this recording way. But if not, we'll figure something out. Because it would be nice for everybody to get together and chat and have like a community thing instead of it being just me as a talking head in the car somewhere and everyone listening to that. One thought that I have already is to just schedule a meeting time to chat after the video is posted. Maybe the day after or a couple days later. I don't actually know.
If people have questions.
Right. And for people who have questions and so on. Like Thursday's actually a bad day because I work that on Thursday nights. But maybe Fridays?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Saturdays? Sundays maybe? Sunday's a good day. Sunday's a good day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe Sundays. Could do Sunday night church meeting type of things. Like a real church. Anyway, let me know your thoughts, guys. And if you have questions, I'll put up a post for, like I said already. And maybe we can all be praying. I'll just be real. We should be praying for each other as much as possible. Because I know that everybody's going through a lot of bullshit right now. Heather's health has been worse in just the last couple of days than it has ever really been. We've pretty much had to live in the car to get away from my mom's place. And I know everyone else is going through stuff too. I know Jeremy's stuff. I know, some of us are really caught up in this whole coronavirus thing. And that's another important thing about this series of messages. Is part of the thing that God did talk about to me was the intention to have this be something where we can really learn to use our respective gift, our respective office to help people in this time and to be involved with people in this time because that's really important. Like, this is a time where we need each other and where others need us, and we're all positioned in ways to be that. So, anyway, we'll all talk soon.